Imagine encountering another species of human. Not ancient apes or distant ancestors, but people who looked almost like you, thought almost like you, but were fundamentally different. People who had ruled Europe for 200,000 years before your ancestors even arrived. 40,000 years ago, in the forests and caves of Europe, two species of humans met for the first time. Modern humans, our direct ancestors, were expanding out of Africa. Neanderthals had been the undisputed masters of Europe for millennia. Both were intelligent, both used tools, both had culture and language. Only one would survive. This is the story of the most consequential meeting in human history. When two human species competed for the same territory, the same resources, and ultimately, the same future. It's a story of survival, competition, and a mystery that scientists are still trying to solve today. For over 200,000 years, Neanderthals had been the sole human inhabitants of Europe. They weren't primitive cave dwellers, they were sophisticated survivors who had mastered one of the most challenging environments on Earth. Neanderthals were built like tanks. Standing about 5.5 feet tall, they were incredibly muscular and robust. Their bones were 50% thicker than modern humans, their muscles were 30% larger, and their hands were so powerful they could crush bones that would break a modern human's grip. But their strength wasn't just physical. Neanderthals had large brains, actually larger than modern human brains. They created sophisticated stone tools, controlled fire, built complex shelters, and even created the first known burial sites. They had developed their own culture, their own traditions, and their own ways of understanding the world. They had survived multiple ice ages, hunting massive mammoths and woolly rhinoceros with nothing but stone-tipped spears. They knew every cave, every river, every seasonal migration route in Europe. This was their territory, refined through thousands of generations of survival. Neanderthal society was highly organized. They lived in extended family groups, shared knowledge about toolmaking and hunting techniques, and cared for their sick and elderly. Archaeological evidence shows they even had a form of medicine, using plants and minerals to treat injuries and illnesses. They had earned their place as the apex predators of Ice Age Europe through intelligence, strength, and an intimate knowledge of their environment that no outsider could match. Then, around 45,000 years ago, everything changed. Strangers appeared at the edges of their territory, tall, lean humans unlike anything they had ever encountered. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, had spent hundreds of thousands of years evolving in Africa. When they finally expanded into Europe around 45,000 years ago, they brought with them technologies and strategies that Neanderthals had never seen. Where Neanderthals were built for power, modern humans were built for endurance. They were taller, leaner, and more efficient long-distance travelers. They had smaller, more graceful bones, but their real advantages weren't physical, they were technological and social. Modern humans brought revolutionary innovations with them. They had developed sophisticated projectile weapons, spear throwers that could kill large animals from distances that Neanderthals couldn't match. They created complex composite tools, combining different materials in ways that made their weapons lighter, sharper, and more durable. But perhaps most importantly, modern humans had developed more complex social structures. While Neanderthals lived in small family groups, modern humans organized themselves into larger tribes with extensive trade networks. They could coordinate activities across vast territories and share innovations rapidly between distant groups. They also brought new forms of symbolic expression. Modern humans created elaborate cave paintings, carved figurines, and complex jewelry. This wasn't just art for art's sake, it was a form of communication that allowed them to store and transmit complex information across generations and between groups. When these two human species first encountered each other, it wasn't a meeting between primitive and advanced civilizations. It was a collision between two different evolutionary strategies, brute strength versus technological innovation, local expertise versus adaptability, traditional methods versus rapid innovation. The stage was set for the most significant competition in human history. The first meetings between Neanderthals and modern humans probably occurred around 45,000 years ago in what is now Eastern Europe. Archaeological evidence suggests these initial encounters were complex, not simple warfare, but a mixture of competition, cooperation, and cultural exchange. Some encounters were peaceful. Genetic evidence shows that the two species interbred, producing hybrid children. This wasn't rare. It was common enough that most people of European descent today carry 1 to 3% Neanderthal DNA. These weren't violent conquests, but genuine relationships between individuals from different species. Archaeological sites from this period show evidence of cultural exchange. We find Neanderthal sites with tools that show modern human influence, and modern human sites with techniques that appear to be learned from Neanderthals. They were learning from each other, adopting each other's innovations. But cooperation coexisted with competition. Both species needed the same resources, the same caves for shelter, the same hunting grounds, the same materials for tools. In some areas, archaeological evidence suggests they may have alternated occupation of the same sites, with one group moving in after another had moved on. However, not all encounters were peaceful. Some Neanderthal remains from this period show evidence of violence that could have come from conflicts with modern humans. Stone tool wounds and trauma patterns suggest that territorial disputes sometimes turn deadly. What's remarkable is that both species continue to evolve and adapt during this period of contact. Neanderthals in areas where they encountered modern humans developed more sophisticated tools and hunting strategies. Modern humans in Europe adopted some Neanderthal techniques for surviving harsh winters. For several thousand years, two different human species shared the European landscape, sometimes competing, sometimes cooperating, but always influencing each other's development. For the first few thousand years of contact, it wasn't clear which species would ultimately dominate Europe. In fact, Neanderthals had several significant advantages that should have given them the upper hand. Their physical superiority was overwhelming. Neanderthals were not only stronger, but they were also better adapted to the European climate. Their stocky build conserved heat more efficiently, their large nasal cavities warmed incoming air better, and their robust bones could handle the physical demands of Ice Age survival better than the more gracile modern humans. They had intimate knowledge of European environments that modern humans couldn't match. Neanderthals knew which caves provided the best shelter, which routes were safest during different seasons, where to find specific types of stone for toolmaking, and how to predict weather patterns. This local expertise was accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years. Their hunting techniques were perfectly adapted to European prey. Neanderthals had developed specialized strategies for hunting mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, and other megafauna that modern humans were only beginning to encounter. They knew the behavior patterns, migration routes, and vulnerabilities of every animal in their territory. Neanderthals also had established territories and social networks. They weren't newcomers struggling to find their place, they were the established inhabitants with generations of accumulated resources, knowledge, and territorial claims. For several millennia, these advantages seemed decisive. Archaeological evidence suggests that in many areas, Neanderthal populations remained stable or even grew during the early period of contact with modern humans. But modern humans had different advantages that would prove more decisive in the long run. While Neanderthals had superior individual strength and local knowledge, modern humans had developed something even more powerful: superior collective intelligence and technological innovation. Modern humans had mastered the art of rapid cultural evolution. While Neanderthal technology remained relatively stable for thousands of years, modern human technology evolved continuously. They developed new hunting techniques, improved tool designs, and innovative survival strategies at a pace that Neanderthals couldn't match. Their larger social networks gave them enormous advantages. When modern humans encountered a problem, a new type of prey, an environmental challenge, or a resource shortage, they could draw on knowledge and innovations from groups hundreds of miles away. Neanderthals were limited to the knowledge of their immediate family groups. Modern humans also developed more efficient hunting strategies. Their projectile weapons allowed them to hunt large animals with less risk and greater success rates. They could take down the same mammoth that Neanderthals hunted, but with fewer hunters and less danger to themselves. Perhaps most critically, modern humans were more adaptable to environmental changes. Around 40,000 years ago, Europe experienced significant climate fluctuations. While Neanderthals had adapted to specific environmental conditions over hundreds of thousands of years, modern humans were more flexible in adjusting to new conditions. Modern humans also had superior population dynamics. Their larger social groups meant they could sustain losses better during hard times and recover more quickly when conditions improved. They could support larger populations in the same territory, giving them numerical advantages in competition for resources. The combination of technological innovation, social cooperation, and adaptability began to tip the balance in favor of modern humans. By 30,000 years ago, Neanderthal populations across Europe were declining rapidly. By 28,000 years ago, they were extinct everywhere except for a few isolated refuges in Spain and Gibraltar. By 24,000 years ago, they had vanished entirely from the archaeological record. The extinction of Neanderthals remains one of the greatest mysteries in human evolution. They weren't eliminated by a single catastrophic event or obvious weakness. Instead, they seem to have been gradually outcompeted by modern humans in a process that took over 10,000 years. Several factors likely contributed to their disappearance. Climate change around 40,000 years ago altered European environments in ways that favored modern human adaptability over Neanderthal specialization. Competition for resources intensified as both populations grew. Modern human technological advantages accumulated over time. But the most significant factor may have been demographic. Modern human populations could grow faster and recover from setbacks more quickly. Even if individual Neanderthals were superior survivors, modern human groups could absorb losses and continue expanding while Neanderthal groups couldn't sustain population declines. Some scientists suggest that hybridization itself may have contributed to Neanderthal extinction. Rather than being completely replaced, Neanderthals may have been absorbed into the expanding modern human population through interbreeding. The final Neanderthal populations survived in isolated refuges where they had temporary advantages, caves in Gibraltar where they could exploit marine resources, mountainous regions in Spain where their cold adaptations remained valuable. But these refuges couldn't sustain them indefinitely. When the last Neanderthal died around 24,000 years ago, an entire branch of human evolution came to an end. A species that had survived for over 400,000 years, that had weathered multiple ice ages, that had developed sophisticated culture and technology, vanished from the earth forever. The meeting between Neanderthals and modern humans 40,000 years ago determined not just who would inherit Europe, but who would inherit the entire planet. If Neanderthals had won that competition, human history would have unfolded completely differently. But here's what's truly remarkable about this story: it wasn't won through violence or conquest. Modern humans succeeded through innovation, cooperation, and adaptability. They didn't destroy Neanderthals in battle, they outcompete them through superior technology and social organization. The Neanderthals who disappeared weren't inferior beings. They were intelligent, sophisticated, successful survivors who had dominated Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Their extinction reminds us that even highly successful species can be vulnerable when faced with new forms of competition. Yet Neanderthals didn't completely disappear. Their genes live on in most people of European descent. Their innovations influenced modern human development. Their story is part of our story, woven into the fabric of human evolution. The competition between Neanderthals and modern humans established patterns that continue to define human civilization today. Innovation over tradition, adaptability over specialization, cooperation over individual strength, these are the characteristics that allowed our ancestors to inherit the earth. What do you think was the decisive factor in this ancient competition? Was it technology, social organization, or something else entirely? And what do you think this prehistoric competition teaches us about human success today? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to continue exploring the incredible journey of human evolution and survival, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Next week, we'll explore another pivotal moment, when humans first learned to cross vast oceans and began the journey that would take them to every corner of the globe. Remember, you carry Neanderthal DNA in your genes and modern human determination in your spirit. You are the living result of humanity's greatest competition, and ultimate cooperation.